What is up, Wizards fans? Welcome into another Believe in Wizards podcast. This is your pregame show for the second preseason game, hopefully a little closer game than the first one. Joining me here today is Ben Mehic. Ben, an OG in the Wizards community here, longtime writer for Bulls Forever, former host of the Locked On Wizards podcast. Ben, how the heck are you?
It's been a while. I'm alive. I've been continuing to follow the Wizards. You probably
Sorry
haven't
for
heard
you.
from
Yeah.
right. You haven't heard from me in a while, I'm sure, on the Wizards front. So I appreciate the invite on the show. I'm excited to talk Wizards. It's been a while.
Yeah, we're happy to have you back in the fold here. So this is awesome. We were talking about this before we were recording. Pretty low stakes game to shake a little podcasting rust off. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, we're sharper than they were in the first preseason game.
Yeah, and look, the Wizards preseason is interesting because they're sort of trotting out the same roster that they're going to play during the regular season. I was watching the Thunder game the other day, and a lot of those, the roster and the guys on the floor are unrecognizable. It's a lot of guys that you're going to see on their G League roster on the Oklahoma
Mhm.
City Blue. Whereas with the
This is what you
Wizards,
get.
it's the main guys. So
Yeah,
it's cool to see them sort of flesh out their rotations in real time and get an extra really shot at what is going to be their actual rotations, I think, this season.
yeah, that's fine by me. I'd rather see more of the guys that we're gonna have to watch. Although I may feel differently 65 games from now and feel like I've seen enough of these guys. But we'll see how it goes. Before we get too far into it, we're brought to you by Stateside Vodka and their Surfside Hard Iced Teas and Bet Online. It's your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. You could probably bet on preseason games if you're an absolute sicko, but I don't know if they're player props for Bilal Coulibaly or any of those kinds of things. But it's worth checking into, and you can always obviously bet on the NFL. That's huge right now. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for your favorite teams. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet online where the game starts. Just maybe let's start with starting fives here a little bit and just kind of tell people who they should expect to see. I have not seen this formally published for the Knicks yet, but this is basically who I think they're supposed to rock with. You got Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Karl Anthony Towns. And then for the Wizards, you've got Jordan Poole, Bilal Coulibaly, Kyle Kuzma, Alex Sarr, Jonas Valanciunas. Just Ben, I guess first question for you. I was of the opinion that like Sarr probably wasn't going to start right out of the gate to start the year, and they'd ease him in like they did Coulibaly last year. But with the Brogdon injury, it just seems like, hey, Coulibaly or Sarr looked good in the first game. Might as well rock with him. And we're not going to see Brogdon for probably 2 months here at least. So why not just start the young guy and just lean right into the tank right away?
Yeah, honestly, I thought they were going to start him all
Okay,
along. I mean, look, this is their top draft pick. This is the
sure.
first front office's opportunity to really showcase the guy who they scouted all year long, who they traveled overseas to see, and who they obviously valued at such a high rate where they took him second overall. This is a total rebuilding season. They're not expected to win, and I think it would be a shame if they didn't start him. What do you got to lose? Like you said, second overall pick, he could be a pillar for the franchise. I think this is a time to experiment, time to let him get all the sort of bumps out of the way. And a lot of players his age don't get that opportunity. You play in the NBA, you don't have an opportunity to learn on the fly, to make mistakes. So I think this is. I'm glad that the Wizards are starting him. This is the way I think they should be approaching the rebuild, is to just let all the young players sort of get as much reps as possible, because the data shows that if you're a young player, the ones that
That's
truly
huge.
progress are the ones that play a lot of minutes early on in their career. So I'm glad that they're going that route.
I think I might just have like Stockholm syndrome from all the years of like drafting guys high and then not playing them until like the last month of the season. So I'm happy about it too. And it's sort of like a win-win situation here. Like, because no matter how good, your rookie raw stretch big center plays, like he's still not gonna be a needle mover enough for you for it to matter. In fact, he'll probably be a net positive, from a macro sense. So you're still helping the overall goal of getting him some more help in, next year's draft.
Yeah, I just think fans have to be patient here. They're still trying to figure out what kind of player he is. I don't think he knows what kind of player he is. I mean, you watch Alex play, there's times where he looks like a wing. He's dribbling between the legs and out in the perimeter. He's settling for jump shots. We saw a lot of that in the summer league. They obviously project him to be a big man, a defensive sort of anchor for them. But I think they're just still trying to figure out where he's comfortable, how they can sort of get him to pick his spots more a bit on the court, and just really sort of learn his tendencies as a player, and learn his comfort levels, where he can contribute most. So this is a learning experience for both him and the team, I think.
Is there
Is
like a
there like a
player comp that stands out most for you for him? Like, is there one guy where you look at him and you think like, Okay, I see this. I see a little of Evan Mobley or Jaren Jackson, or is there one that stands out to you the most?
I think you just said two names that I think his ceiling is probably those players, guys who have all-star potential. That's the really interesting part about the Wizards' young players is like what is Bilal Coulibaly? I mean, there's a world in which he's an OG Anunoby type or a Mikal
Mhm.
Bridges type, and those names come to mind obviously because of their matchup tonight. And then there's another world where he's sort of just a role-playing 3-and-D guy. And I think Alex Sarr similarly could be a stretch big, like you said, a Jaren Jackson Jr. And I think at worst, and this isn't a great comp, but something that comes to mind when he's had his worst games is like a Jared Jeffries type, a switchable
Yeah,
defender who's rebounding, doing some of the scrappy work. And that's obviously if something goes wrong or if he doesn't develop the way that they hope. But it's really he's a project. You see that term thrown around in the NBA, but he really totally is. And I think you'll see the course of his career sort of impacted by the player development skills on the Wizards coaching staff right now. He's a guy that they can totally mold. And that's really neat for a player because lately the draft prospects come in and you kind of have an idea as to who they're going to be. But Alex Sarr is a recent top pick where there's really no clue as to who he'll become. There's a ton of upside there, a lot of defensive potential. You said you called him a stretch big. He shot pretty poorly.
potentially. Yeah,
Yeah, he shot pretty poorly before he got to the States, but jump shot looks good. He hit a couple of threes in his initial preseason game. So there's when you look at a glass half full, he looks like a really good prospect. It's just going to take a lot of time for him, and the fans just have to be patient.
and I think all fans probably do this, but I obviously pay the most attention to Wizards fans. But like to me, a somewhat overreaction to how good Bub Carrington was in summer league, and I think the expectation was like he would be that all season no matter what. And he was a little rougher around the edges in the first preseason game, and similarly for Sarr, like he was bad in summer league and good last night. I think we just need to be patient that this is going to be like the ultimate, mixed bag year for both of those guys and Keyshawn George as well. Like you might see a 20-point game from one of them on 7 of 9 from the floor. And, the next 3 games, they might not make 7 total shots or something like that.
Yeah, look, I'm a fan of the Bosnian national team, the soccer team, and they'll win a game and they're going to win the World Cup, and then they'll lose a game and they're the worst team ever. There has to be a level of logic that's approached here. I mean, Bub was a very heavily perimeter-oriented player in college. He shot the vast majority of his shots outside the paint, and he struggled to finish inside. Usually, players who are heavily perimeter-oriented and take a lot of their shots from beyond the three-point arc are probably going to struggle their first year in the league, and you're going to have games where he scores 20 and you're going to have games where he scores 2 on pretty poor efficiency. So you just, again, patience is going to be a key for the Wizards this year.
Christian Gardner has a question for us in the chat. What's the best overreaction you want to have coming out of tonight? Anything spring to mind of an overreaction you'd like to be able to have of, I don't know, is Alex Sarr like going to win Rookie of the Year if he has another 15 and 10 kind of night?
I think Bilal Coulibaly. I think his game could mirror Mikal Bridges, who's awesome. I mean, Mikal
Yeah.
Bridges on his best night is a top 35 player in the NBA, and if Bilal Coulibaly looks like he can compete with Mikal Bridges tonight, and you could see elements of his game in Bilal, and you could project that out, I think that'd be an awesome sort of overreaction to say, look, we may not win a ton of games this year, but this kid could be pretty damn good in 2-3 years. Look at the way he's defending Mikal Bridges. Look at the way he's getting stops against him, and he's hitting. And look, he had some pretty good shots in the initial preseason game where he was patient with his dribble, created some distance in the mid range, and hit a pull up jumper there. So the shades of Mikal Bridges. I think if we can project out today and say, wow, this kid's gonna have a similar career, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I totally agree. If we can like end tonight with the Spider-Man meme in mind of
Sure,
those two guys,
exactly.
like that's the dream.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can think that about him in year 2 and at least reasonably see it, and then there's still some untapped potential. Like I think there's still like Mikal Bridges potential left, to untap. You saw a little more playmaking in other stops. So, someone like Coulibaly, if you just kind of get like inklings of that early enough, I think that'd be like a perfectly good takeaway from this whole season, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, fans tend to have such short-term memories. I mean, look, Mikal, it took him some time to become a good NBA player. He was a
Yeah, sure.
defensive-oriented player who developed his three-point shot, and then he was a 3-and-D guy, and then he got to Brooklyn, and he blossomed as a player who can create his own shot, and obviously looked like an all-star caliber player. It took him some time. It took him, quite a few years there. He's still a young player, but it might take Bilal sometime too. And the Wizards fans, I think they have a tendency and a personality to get really down when things don't look great immediately. And I know that there's been some rough years in Washington, but this is really cool that they have an actual direction now. That the direction is to rebuild or reconstruct, or whatever phrase that Will Dawkins is using nowadays. It's
Depends on
cool
the
that
day.
right, exactly. I think he's leaning into the we're deconstructing. I think he's calling
Deconstruction.
it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's a good way to describe what they're doing because they still have some veterans on their roster that you sort of have to look at puzzly and wonder how they're going to fit in there, by February or next year even. So it's a really cool thing to see and observe the Wizards actually have a direction in the sense of direction as to what they're going to look like in 2-3 years or hope to look like in 2-3 years.
It's just fun to have hope
Yeah.
for the future. And every time one of these guys has a night like Sar had, on the first night. I mean, it would have been a little better if they didn't lose by like 30, but I'm just solely focused on, how each of them look. If Koulibaly has 25 tonight, I'll care nothing about the entire rest of the game. Just want to see something from at least one of the guys every time. For everybody checking this out, click the little like button for us on YouTube, rate, review, subscribe, retweet it for folks if you're watching this on Twitter. We always appreciate that. Shout out, it never makes no sense in the chat. Weezus dangerously, the man Wayne in the house here. Hustle for more says, I like Sar and Bagley at the 4 rotation. Valanciunas is rebounding. We may not be last in defensive rebounding this year. Like that's the sole reason I think at this point to put Valanciunas on the court is just defensive rebounding. And like maybe you get a few like bully ball buckets around the rim, but that's the one thing he does for you immediately is raise your floor as a defensive rebounding unit. Otherwise, I thought night one was a little rough for him, honestly.
Yeah, but you know what you're going to get from Jonas Valanciunas at this point in his career. I thought that signing was really sneaky good from this front office. He adds some stability to the front court and to the locker room. And look, Alex Sarr struggled in summer league. He's still
Sure.
learning his body. He's still filling out. He's very young. Physicality in the NBA has been a lot higher the past couple of years than it's been in recent history. So you need a guy up there that could quote unquote absorb the blows at least for the first few months of his career until he gets his feet wet. So I thought that was a super great signing, and then obviously it allows them to potentially trade him in February. And I think Jonas knows that. The front office knows, he's there for a purpose, and we'll see how that sort of plays out come February.
Yeah, that's really the thing. Like my one nitpick about them so far is just they have not been as successful as I think they would have liked in the trading old guys for stuff realm of things. So hopefully that this is, all it takes is one of those guys to get more than you expect, and you're net ahead at the end of the night. If they get a first for him, or I mean, they're not gonna, but like if they flip him for something more than that, we'll forget quickly about the Tyus Jones and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Look, though, I think fans also have a tendency to extrapolate trade value
Sure.
just based on the things that they're imagining in their head, when in reality they have no clue what this player's value is on the trade market. I mean, Tyus Jones signed what for veterans minimum
Sure.
with the Phoenix Suns. I think that sort of exemplifies what his value was in reality. There's not a ton of market value for an undersized point guard who likely won't play more than 20 minutes on a winning team. That's just the fact of the matter. And look, if you're a fan of a team and you're observing Tyus Jones day in and day out, the way you're considering him and his value in the NBA is going to be a lot different than, say, other teams that have priorities and sort of fundamental rules as to how they want to build their team. And usually 5-10 point guards that don't extract a ton of value in the NBA.
It's a very good point. It never makes no sense said in the chat. Sar looked a lot better at the 5 than the 4. I agree with that. I also think this is another matchup tonight where you might actually be better off giving more of those minutes to Sar at the 5. Like Cat is a little more perimeter oriented, so I don't think like Sar is going to get like bully balled necessarily. Whereas it kind of takes away a lot of the value that Valanciunas provides if you have somebody bringing him that far away from the basket. So it'd be a nice night to let Valanciunas play his way into shape a little bit, play the first half, and then continue to let Sar kind of rock out for as much of the third quarter as he can play against Towns and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as many reps as you can get against elite talent for these young guys is a
True.
plus. And there's going to be moments where these kids look unprepared, or they look overwhelmed. And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of a rebuild. And look, I know that some people lament about Bilal Coulibaly's sort of shot production last year, where he was stuck in a corner at times. He was guarding the best player on an opposing team night in and night out. That matters. And I think it carries with his confidence. There were possessions where he was guarding Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, and he looked competent. A lot of 19-year-old players can't say that. So defensively, I think it matters too, the reps matter for a guy like Alex Sarr. Karl Anthony Towns, for whatever you want to say about him, he's a top 5 center in the NBA. And for
100%.
19, 20-year-old can get reps against him, that's always going to help in his development.
Yeah, it's a huge learning opportunity. Hustle for More says Val mentoring Sar and Vucevic is diabolical. Even Brogdon mentoring Bub is a sneaky mentorship there. Both 6'4" big guards. Yeah, I like that one too. Sam Hershey said, "Do we see more of Vucevic and Butler earlier tonight?" That's a good question. I think maybe in the second preseason game you start to kind of ramp things up a little bit more, and then I'd say probably in the last two is when you're less likely to see, the starters play more than like the first half. If you're the Wizards, it's not like you need to rest your veterans for a long NBA season or anything like that. So that'll be interesting. And then shout out Ace of Stripe in the chat here as well. Ben, is there one particular matchup tonight that you're just most interested in seeing the two guys matched up? Is it Brunson against Poole? Is it Koulibaly against Bridges? I mean, what's kind of standing out to you?
I think the Koulibaly one. I think that really is going to be exemplary, and you can sort of see the growth in his game. Over the past summer, he played obviously for the Olympic team in France this year. He looks a lot more confident with the ball in his hands, and I want to see him attack and be aggressive against a player like Mikal Bridges, who's one of the better perimeter defenders in the NBA. So that's what I'm going to look out for. The type of aggression. Is he going to settle? Is he going to look confident against a player like Mikal Bridges, who I'm sure he's looked up to in his career and watches a ton of film on? So it'll be I think the matchup of the game.
That was mine before the game, but now that I'm thinking a little bit more about Sar against Cat and what that looks like, I'm also you really can't go wrong here too, and maybe Bub against Brunson or that's kind of the cool thing is one of these guys is going to get a tough matchup, every night of the year. And I think no matter what, somebody's like learning and growing from that, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's this season is really interesting for the Wizards because they're still trying to figure out who the foundational pieces of this roster are going to be. I mean, there's a world in which none of the young guys on the roster are foundational pieces, and they end up just being bridges to a culture build. I mean, you just saw with Julius Randle where he was on the roster for quite some time, helped build a culture, and then obviously once they built that culture, they made a move to add to the roster and fill a need at the center position. Saw it with Marcus Smart. So there's a world in which Bilal Coulibaly is a foundational guy and Bub is a foundational guy. And there's also a world where they draft Cooper Flag and draft another player after him who are foundational pieces, and players like Bilal or Alex are supplemental pieces and sort of star in their role. So we'll see where it goes. I think sometimes fans want to look towards the future and say Bub could be an all-star in 4 years, or maybe Alex is starting center in 5 years. You never know what the type of roster they're going to have in that time. And I think this is an important year for the front office and the coaching staff to figure out who can actually be there when the time to actually compete is going to be.
My stance has kind of been like, even if these guys don't pan out or turn into anything special, I still like the process that they seem to be going through and the approach to the types of guys that they're prioritizing now. And, if you miss on a few, like, so be it. I don't think any of these guys will be misses in the sense that they're not at least like productive NBA players based on what we've seen. But I'm with you. Like what the ceiling is, like, you just kind of like let the chips fall where they may. And if it works out, great. And if they draft over them, it probably means that they're getting some, really good players later in the draft here too. The one thing I wrote down as a major storyline for tonight, it's not really so much a storyline. It's just kind of my own little musing here of like, I used to have like this empathy for Knicks fans because I felt like they knew what it was like to be a Wizards fan, right? Of like, we're sort of in purgatory. We won't fully blow it up, but we're bad. We're not good enough. And now they've kind of totally gone the other way. And at first I was a little jealous of that, but now it's like, all right, well, they've shown what a competent front office can do. And they've honestly turned this thing around like relatively quickly. And I think that's got to give you a little bit of hope as a Wizards fan of just like, they're not far removed from like where we were with like the Beal era teams. And now all of a sudden, this is an Eastern Conference contender level team. And so hopefully we can be a couple years behind them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have some diehard Knicks fans in my life. My best friend's a diehard Knicks fan. I'm a New Yorker. There was a lot of dread about the non-direction of the team, and then Jalen Brunson comes around and changes the entire trajectory of the roster. You look at the 2 years ago, they were playing R.J. Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, Julius Randle, and those teams were fun. They were scrappy, but there's a ceiling with those teams. And now they created a winning culture, and through that culture, they made some really big free agent signings with Isaiah Hartenstein. Obviously, they made that move for OG. They made this move for Mikal, and then now they make this move for Cat. And they developed a culture that sort of helped become a magnet for talent. And now they have this whole thing going. They have Tom Thibodeau sort of now looked at as a as a great coach again. Whereas 5, 6 years ago, he was looked at as a retreat. He's helped
True.
develop a culture, and they've created like a familial sort of thing there. With obviously with the Villanova thing going, they have
Mhm.
Leon Rose there, who used to rep some of these guys, and
Brunson's
Jalen
dad.
Brunson's dad is there.
Yeah,
So they've
exactly.
created this whole thing, this whole culture that's just gonna, they created a system that's gonna work by itself now. That's really special, and the Wizards can sort of piggyback off that. That doesn't mean that they're going to go ahead and sign some of the or
Sure.
hire parents to be the coach, but there is a way to rebuild, and I think the Knicks didn't do it necessarily through the draft, but through key free agent signings. They built a culture, and obviously now they have a contender.
What I heard there is that we should be going out and signing all 3 of the Antetokounmpo brothers, to fill in and try to sway Giannis to come here at some point down the road.
I'm old enough to remember when they hired Kevin Durant's high school coach, and
Right, exactly.
it didn't
It
work
worked
out
out great.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
A couple more questions in the chat here, guys. We'll save those for the post game here because they're sort of more macro things. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, right after the game ends, so probably around 10-ish, given how long these games seem to take. So feel free to jump back in here with us. It'll be me and Will Clayton for the post game. Ben, welcome back into the Wizards podcasting mix here. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm looking forward to seeing more of you as the season goes on.
Of course. Thank you for having me, man. I just want to give you a public shout out. Matt is doing the most consistent, best Wizards content out there. And I mean that. There's a lot of people lacking out there or are restricted in some capacity. Matt's doing independent content, and that's what makes journalism go nowadays. So I appreciate Matt, and I hope you guys do too.
Yeah, really, that means a lot coming from you, man. Thank you. All right, guys, let's go watch this game. Let's see if we have something fun to talk about post game. If again you haven't hit that like button for us, please do that. And this Believe in Wizards, represented by betonline.ag, and we will catch y'all next time. Peace.